Get ready. This is a recap about my life and how I've gotten to where I am and how much further, in my own eyes, I think I have to go. So, a lot of times people ask, hey, how did you get into landscape lighting? And it's one of those things where life, what I've totally learned, will completely turn and different things will happen. I don't know that many people, I mean, maybe now say, hey, I want to get into landscape lighting. And maybe that's bad. I don't want to talk down about it, but I wanted to play golf. I wanted to teach golf. And that's what I went to school to do. And yes, there's a school. It's called well, at the time, I'm sure it's still around, but they had the San Diego Golf Academy. And this academy is basically a year and a half program that they take you and they teach you all the things you need to know to run a pro shop, how to put on tournaments, how to write in calligraphy. You even studied even business law. It was a pretty detailed program. Obviously, we studied and learned how to teach and we critiqued the golf swing. So you would literally within a year and a half leave the actual academy ready to really start giving lessons and then a lot of the good fundamentals of getting started and running a pro shop. And what you might not know is that a lot of pro shops, the golf pro, whoever's the head pro, that's like their own, they're making little commissions on every little thing that's sold out of there. You're running your own little business. And then a lot of times, or at least back when I was looking to do this, you had a small salary, but then you made your money in the golf lessons and you made your money on all the things that you sold in your golf pro shop. So you might be regripping, doing new grips, you might be selling clubs, you might be selling accessories, obviously apparel and stuff like that. And that's how you made the money in running a golf store. So I go through this program and let me tell you, this is some of the best times of my life. I think we're always living in the good old days. And now I realize that, but I didn't realize it way back then. I was young. I was 19 years old. Kind of funny story. I lived in a house I've lived in a couple different places, but during that year and a half time, but I did live, one of the most memorable times was living in a home with a guy from Mexico, a guy from England, a guy from Canada, and then myself and another guy that was from the United States too, out of Gary, Indiana. So, which is scary enough right there too in itself. It was a really great, I met so many different people at the San Diego Golf Academy. You had people from all over. Guy from Spain that was an amazing golfer. You may know if you're somewhat of a golfer. Actually, for a very short time, one of my roommates was a guy by the name of Michael Block, who is a teaching pro, but about, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, he actually finished in the top 20 in the PGA Championship, I believe. So, really cool stories and some really cool relationships to actually meet with all these guys, all these different people across the country that came. And there's a lot of people too from like Korea and all there that came to this golf academy. And then, all these different cultures. It was really kind of interesting time in my life. And it was so cool because I would wake up, I'd go to school and learn and talk about all the things related for the most part. We would do that for about 8 o'clock till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. And then after there, we would go play golf or we would go practice golf or we would go get lessons. In that time, you're really perfecting your own golf game as well too. And it was going to be my life, right? And forward, go through the school, get a job in Arizona at a golf course out in Mesa called Longbow. And I get a job and I'm just cleaning clubs. That's all I'm doing. I'm working in the cart barn, carts, cleaning carts, and really scrubbing guys' clubs after they got done playing. And make some tips, trying to get an assistant pro job. Let me tell you, when you're down in a place like Phoenix, there is a golf pro on every single corner. So I tried to give that a go out there. Couldn't really find any opportunities other than the experience I had, which was little to none, other than just going to the school. You couldn't find an actual assistant pro. So I ended up moving back to St. Louis. And while I'm looking for a job as an assistant pro at some club, I had a good buddy of mine approach me and said, hey, I just got this part-time job. And what I do is I go out at night and I've got all these different lights and I set them up and I show people what their house and their landscape looks like. Would you be interested in doing these nighttime demonstrations? They're only commission, so if you sell it, you get something. If you don't, well, then you don't. And I was so intrigued by that. I was like, okay. At the time, I also just needed money, so the way I looked at it was like, hey, it can't hurt anything. I sold actual job. I would typically, I think I was making, if I sold it for full price, I got $15 a light, and if I discounted it to a certain point that they would let me go to, I got $10 a light. And remind you, at this time now, I'm just around 20 years old, 2021. able to a job and literally make $300 or $400 in the course of maybe just a couple hours, that really got my attention. But that's how I got into landscape lighting. And I went to school, I had done all the path, I had full commitment to be this golf trainer, and here I am, all of a sudden, was going to just be a side gig for me to make a couple extra bucks. Turned into something I really loved. I love seeing the home, the transformation, the setting it up and then plugging it in and hearing the homeowner go, wow, like really loving it, and just the home just kind of really popping at night. That really did something for me. And before I knew it, I ended up going to work for the company that I was just doing sales for as a full-time installer. And I was also selling lights at night. So, this is at a very young age. Started to really get into landscape lighting, and all that happened within about a year. Then I had the opportunity to actually go out to Kansas City, and was working with the franchise, and they had wanting to open a new franchise in Kansas City, and I jumped on that opportunity, and I was able to get that, and that is really when, in 2001, I really went out on my own and really got the opportunity to learn the business. And boy, did I make a ton of mistakes. There's times that you just have to go through life, not why you might be in the particular situation or what's going to happen next, but for some reason, things always tend to kind of happen, and they tend to find and work themselves out. And I'll tell you, going business, going to moving city that I knew nobody, I had no connections. It is a blessing that I was able to do the amount of business that we did do, for that opportunity. Now, I didn't make it rich, I could say I sold my company and made millions of dollars, but that wasn't the case. But it's bigger than that. It's led to other opportunities that I was able to cherish from. It taught me so many different lessons about the landscape lighting business, about how to grow an actual market, how to actually get in and how the service industry can be very different, and how respond to things versus another. There was a lot of little lessons just in business that you learn from doing these kind of things. And I still try to always figure things out and try to have a good path for where we're going. But the reality is, we don't ever know. Things for a reason in our lives, and some of it we can control, but a lot of the stuff you just can't, because it's not up to us. My belief, there's power, right? So my whole is, trust, enjoy the process, understand that things are happening for a reason. They're not just happening, and try to make honestly the best of it. Think situation and understand that, yeah, maybe this is how you ultimately see yourself. Maybe this isn't where exactly you want to be, but trust that that process that you're on is, maybe you got to go through some of these things before you're ready to get to that next chapter of yourself. Now, I'm 48 years old, and let me tell you, there's probably, maybe a lot of people feel like this. I'm still trying to figure out, what I do and where I want to go. Probably feels that way by this, but I'm going to tell you, I'm always pushing myself, always wanting to do more, wanting to do better, and now I'm able to work in our industry, in the landscape lighting industry, and worked as a rep. I've worked as a distributor's rep, been able to make relationships across the country, and a lot of those relationships have really bettered and given experience and the knowledge of doing landscape lighting, and an opportunity to meet with just some really amazing people that are in this industry. And I've been able to continue I've been able to continue to learn all the different things that you need to know. And I've been able to experience that a lot of the challenges that I thought maybe I might only be facing, they were facing too, and they were having it. And some things I were able to look and see how they had with it, and I was able to kind of learn from what they did to help better myself, and vice versa. We're always learning, It's one of those things where if you think that you maybe know it, really not in a good place to be. You want to continue to always learn and to broaden that knowledge. And if you can humble yourself enough to that, and always really take that, take the approach, you're here to learn, you're here to get better, man, you're going to be a superstar. That's mind frame that you want. So I hope you enjoyed this little story about kind of how I went into landscape lighting. To play golf, just I don't play quite as much as I used to, but what life has entailed for you.